Yeah, it's kind of funny because when you said you wanted to talk about leadership by fear versus leadership by influence, my mind actually went in two different directions. And I had to kind of think about that. And that's part of what we'll talk about, I'm sure, which is, are you talking about a leader who tries to lead with fear by invoking fear in his people? Or are you talking about a leader who is feeling fear themselves and yet has to lead? Right? Because
No.
that's kind of two sides of the conversation, to be honest with you.
I think the kind of leader that most of us at some point encounter in our careers is the type of leader that tries to evoke a feeling of fear on their employees, right? I
Right.
mean, if you don't do your job or if you don't do what I'm asking you to do, I'm going to fire you. That
Right.
type of leader.
Right. Which is kind of funny, and I set us up because truthfully, the only way you lead that way, which is through fear, scarcity, demands, micromanaging. That's how we experience leadership through fear. But my experience is every leader who leads through fear is themselves full of fear, right? Because when we're fearful and we're afraid of our own career, we're afraid of our own imposter syndrome, we're afraid of our own capabilities, what do we want? We want control, right? And we think that if I can control this and I can plan for every possible eventuality, I can make sure that nothing happens. And I'm really afraid that if something happens that I haven't planned for or I haven't thought of, I'm going to lose control. I'm going to look foolish. I'm going to lose the quote unquote respect of my people. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze as tight as I can and try to control everything I can. Not because it gets the best results, but because that's what I have to do to give myself the assurance, or at least the veil of assurance that I'm in control and I'm competent and I know what I'm doing. How they
It,
do that is the ways that we talked about. Schedule pressure, got to be done like this, got to, if you don't do this, then all these threats and all that negative reinforcement.
it almost feels like a self-defense mechanism, right?
100%.
And
100%.
why do you think this type of of leadership style is still so common today? Because it's not like, like employees aren't aware of the fact that, hey, this person is leading by fear.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think those leaders are still so afraid of just being open and
Yeah.
sh- aren't as open to be seen as vulnerable by their employees?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This kind of echoes a little bit of a conversation we had a while ago about relationships, right? Because a leader subordinate dynamic is a relationship. So why is it? How do we get that? Well, I'll be honest with you. A lot of it is that's just learned behavior, right? It's just learned behavior. When you're a young pup coming up in your industry or coming up in your company, who do you admire? Who do you look up to? And it's like your boss. Is it because you think that's the best person you've ever met? Probably not. What you're looking at is positional authority. You know what? I'm sick and tired of being told what to do. That guy treats me like crap. So the answer is let me get in his position. And then instead of him treating me like crap, I'll be in a position where no one treats me like crap. Obviously, that's extremely short sighted. That's not how it really works, but it's a learned behavior. That's what I have to do to succeed in this environment because clearly it worked for them.
It's a company cultural thing.
Company, industry, society, absolutely. Now, I have a really optimistic view of the future, and I'm not picking on generations, but I do believe that a lot of this demonstrated behavior is generational. It is a certain generation of person and people who, this is, we still have a generation of people who were raised and believed that you graduate high school, you go to college, you get a job, you work for that employer for 40 years, you retire, you collect a pension, and that's it. There's still people operating, running companies, leading people who are operating under that outline and under that framework. And that framework is so ridiculously outdated, but they haven't caught up with that. So there's this really optimistic side of me that that generation is slowly leaving the workforce, turning it over to Generation X, turning it over to millennials, right? And we have a much different view of what contribution looks like, what collaboration looks like, what positive and negative reinforcement look like. I mean, just take a look at any of the interviews that are going out. What do people want from their job? And salary and benefits is way down on that list. When you talk to the generation that's in the workforce right now, what do they want? They want opportunity, they want growth, they want collaboration, they want creativity. It's like, wait a minute. None of that fits into the model that we're talking about. And none of that exists in a fear-based environment.
What is so special about millennials and younger generations? Is it because at the end of the day, I mean, these younger generations have been raised by the older generations. So you'd think that we would have picked up a little bit of that fear-based leadership from our parents as well.
Oh yeah, but what we have is we have a rebellion against it is what we have.
Because we don't
So
like it.
right. And I believe you can't ignore the influence of our completely, utterly, totally connected world, the impact of social media. Yeah, it's social media, but don't kid yourself. It's professional media as well, right? There's a lot of people who listen. This is how this is how societies influence other societies, right? And I'll be very U.S. centric for a moment and say part of what we do well, part of our success has been the republic that we have and the strong, staunch pursuit of capitalism. Okay. There's a ton of proof out there that those things really raise the standard of living wherever they're implemented in a healthy and positive way. Okay. So part of our influence, historically, it's been let's go to that country, let's overthrow that regime, let's get somebody elected, let's teach it right. But now it's a bit more subtle, and it's like just hey, go on YouTube, go on TikTok,
And show
go on
people
Instagram, and
how
look
cool
at
of a life we have over here.
look at what we have, right? And so having access, that connectedness, and having access to information, it happens at the job level. Okay, so, oh, I'm a digital marketer at this company, and this is what my life is like. Blah. Oh, wow, I'm a digital marketer at this company, and my life is nothing like that. It's like this. Whoa, wait a minute. What's the difference? We both went to the same school. We both studied the same thing. We both have the same credentials. We're both the same age. We both work in the same industry, but we're having very different experiences. How is that? And so this generation is catching on much, much quicker that, oh, wait a minute. Who I work for is 75% of my job experience, right? It's almost overused now, but people don't leave jobs. They leave managers. They leave
People.
leadership, right? They leave people. Absolutely. So this new generation, they have access to that information. You're able to read about it and see it and recognize, hey, wait a minute. There's a better way than the way that I'm experiencing. In the past, we didn't have a voice. We didn't know. We had one example. This is it. You want to work here? This is how it's done. End of story. And we didn't question it because there were no other examples. There was no other data.
Let me ask you, Charles, you just said that people leave managers, they leave organizations where the leadership is toxic. Is that the only solution that employees have today if they're being supervised by a toxic leader? Is that the only thing that you can potentially do? Is speaking to your manager and letting them know that, hey, you're being an asshole or you're
Yeah.
creating a toxic work environment for me or something a real solution, or should people just look for a different job?
Yeah, no. And actually, there's a huge movement of rebellion where people are saying, whoop, nope. I experienced it. I experienced it in my 20s when I got out of the Navy, and I'm being managed and led by people who learned how to manage and lead in the 70s and in the 80s. And so you can imagine the horrible dysfunction, the bigotry, the racism, the sexism, the ageism that was going on when I entered the workforce after I left the Navy. And I want to take credit for being part of that first generation and that first wave that said, whoa. you can't talk like that. Right? And we did that in a very open environment. And it's like, what are you talking about? One, you can't curse at me like that. Two, don't you ever get in your face and like bully me and spit in my face and yell at me. This is a professional environment. We don't do that. Now, granted, I was blessed to be in the nuclear power industry where we had federal agencies like the NRC who were specifically measuring and auditing and paying attention to chilled work environments. But that's basically what we're talking about. We're talking about forms of intimidation and bullying to get people to do what we're doing, which is leading by fear, right? Just do what I say. Don't bring up any concerns. Don't challenge the organization. And I'm blessed to have been in that industry where that wasn't good enough, where everybody was empowered and had a voice. So just leaving that kind of quiet resignation, it'll send a signal to that organization that they have a problem, but it is very lagging. And if the toxicity starts at the very top, they're going to ignore that metric anyway. They're going to rationalize that metric away and say, oh, it's just this generation, these millennials, these Gen Zs, they're so soft, they're just quitter, right? They're going to rationalize it away and they're not going to take responsibility. So if you're, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you. So, and I think you were about to answer the question, which is, so what do you suggest people do?
Yeah, I mean, so that's why the landscape has changed quite a bit. And we do have a lot more options than just take it or leave it, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about. In the past, it was take it or leave it. I can't think of any company except a very, very, very small privately owned company somewhere that doesn't have an employee assistance program, that doesn't have and this is tricky. HR is really tricky because they're there for us, but let's not kid ourselves. The CEO still pays their salary. They still are acting in the best interest of the company, not necessarily the best interest of the individual. But there are ways to do that. What I suggest though is if you want to be a professional, don't be passive aggressive about it. Don't just immediately turn to social media. Every organization has great people. Every organization has great people. Find a great person in that organization who will empathize with you, who would be a mentor. Ask for help. Hey, in this very, very specific environment, is there a way for me to navigate this? How do I do this? That's an option. If you don't have that, you can go outside that company and still look for a mentor to say, hey, Dad, hey, Uncle Charles, like, holy crap, like that you will not believe this guy that I'm having to deal with, right? So that's a way for you. And listen, there's a lot of benefit for you facing that and learning to deal with that because that's going to influence who you become as a leader. I promise you right now, some of the greatest traits that I have as a leader, I don't have because I was born as a special person. I have these traits because I lived through horrible, horrible management, toxic leadership. And I said, I will absolutely never treat people that way.
I can 100% resonate with that sentiment, Charles. And something else that I've noticed about toxic leadership environments is that typically speaking, A players leave the company because they're not afraid to go find a different job where they're not being managed by an asshole. And it's typically the C players that are a little bit more afraid, or they're not as they don't value themselves as much as an employee or so, that are scared to lose their jobs.
Yep.
Which, typically speaking, the pattern that I've noticed, and I'm sure there's exceptions for this, is that the really, really, really great companies to work at and the ones that are filled with A players are the ones where people actually want to work at.
Absolutely. And it's a differentiator. So as a business, you have a responsibility to get the best talent available. Period. You have that responsibility as a leader, as an executive of that company. Your job is you figure out how to pay those people, you figure out how to recruit those people, you figure out how to retain those people, you figure out how to challenge those people. But you have a responsibility to your shareholders and to your stakeholders to have the absolute best talent. Companies that are managed as opposed to companies that are led, they don't. What they're trying to do is they're trying to run that company through minimalization, through scarcity and through fear. which is let's pay as little as we can, let's invest as little as we can, let's get the people that we can control the most, right? And those are typically marginalized people, people who don't have the training, who don't have the experience, and have to just do what they're told. You're absolutely right. I've done it. I really do consider myself an A player in my industry and in my space. And I have left organizations after 18 months of trying to be heard, and they won't hear me. And I'm like, peace. I tried my very best. And I can watch. Listen, anytime I enter an organization, when I'm invited in, hey, Charles, we're having this trial. We want you to come in, take a look, consult, give us some advice. The first thing I do is shut my mouth and just walk around and pay attention to exactly those things you're talking about. What's the mood? What is the culture here? Are people, do they feel confident that they can point out problems and bring up mistakes and errors, or is it a chilled work environment? Who are the managers paying the most attention to? A little Pareto here. Are they spending all their time rewarding the right behaviors, or are they spending all their time trying to correct the wrong behaviors? All those are indicators. And I'm telling you, I can do this watching football. My daughter and I have this joke, right? Because she's a psychology major with sports performance as her focus. So we can watch a match, and I can just watch the pitch, and I can watch how players are interacting with each other. Same team. And if they're arguing and pointing fingers and blaming, you're going to lose. End of story. You're going to lose. That's what I look for when I go into an organization.
Out of curiosity, do you think?
Yep.
Do you think when you're looking at a football game, for example, and you do see that sort of behavior in players, do you think the manager is responsible for that? Or
absolutely, because that's culture. That's culture, and culture is the behavior that you allow. You get the culture that you allow. End of story.
That is so fascinating. Let me ask you, this is a great moment for me to just give you a true or false question. So, Charles, true or false? A bad leader or a toxic leader can turn an A player into a C player.
Not only true, but it's a guaranteed outcome. It's a guaranteed outcome. That person will either devolve into a C player where all they do is the minimum. So let's put a little more meat on those bones. So yes, absolutely true. A horrible toxic leader will shove someone down and suppress someone down to the minimum viable performance standard. That's what negative reinforcement does. Okay? Negative reinforcement is we need 12 units per shift. How many did you get today? 11. You suck. You are horrible people. Figure it out. The next day, how many did you get? 12. The next day, 12. Next day, 12. Are you guys getting any better? Is there ever an opportunity to make 13? I don't know. That's not my goal. You told me my goal was 12. And when I got 11, you lit me up. So why would I go to 13? Because guess what I know? 13 is now going to become the new expectation. Listen, that's not rocket science. I did not invent that. That is observable over and over and over. And that's the culture. Hey, man, we make 12. Slow down. Relax. 12 is what we're supposed to make. We only do what we're told. What you're losing out on as a micromanager and as a toxic leader is this thing called discretionary effort, right? If the goal is let's do our best. Hey, do you guys have any ideas? Is there anything hindering you from doing your job that I can help remove or alleviate? Bring those to me. Now, all of a sudden, you have a team that's like, dude, I think we can make 14. Oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if we made 15? I wonder what would happen. Like, what if we, and now we also have a little bit of bandwidth because we know we can easily meet our goal. We can get creative. And we can start talking about other things that we might be able to do. But that toxic leader will take an A player. And what makes an A player, right? Oh, they have ideas. They're being creative. They see the big picture. They want things to improve. They're looking strategically. They volunteer. They're playing the long game. What does toxic management want? Compliance, 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 right? Managers ensure we're doing things right. That's it. Leaders ensure we're doing the right things. Very different. Leaders pay attention to behaviors. Managers pay attention to outcomes. So if you have a toxic leader who's very closed-minded like that, dude, don't bring me anything new. Like, shut up. Do what you're supposed to do. That's going to take an A player and go, clearly my talents aren't appreciated or needed here. What you want is a trained monkey. I am not a trained monkey. I am leaving.
God, Charles, you're you're just hitting all the right spots, man. I can relate so much to everything that you're describing. Can let's shift gears, and so I think we've done a pretty good job of outlining what it feels like and what it means to lead by fear. Let's actually pivot and talk about what a good leader looks like. So let's talk about leading by influence. What is the main difference?
Yeah, leading through influence, this is going to turn into a parenting story because I think about this a lot, and I have to try to explain this to clients who are struggling, who arguably are brilliant people, who have a track record of success. But leading through fear has a half-life, right? Leading through fear has a very finite window. You can get short-term success out of leading with fear. And there's people who are listening to this who are scoffing at me saying that I've never worked in the real world and I've never had to. Guess what, dude? I'll meet you outside because yes, I have. I have taken fear-led organizations, turned them around through influence and blown the lid off everything that they ever thought that they could achieve. How did I do that? By stroking their hair and telling them that they're pretty? No. Absolutely not. By challenging them, but first and foremost, by being a leader of influence, I took responsibility for their success. Okay? Management, and I'm using those words, management being like the bad, leadership being the good, management being just do what you're supposed to do, leadership being much more aspirational and much more influential, right? So management is, you have to do what you are supposed to do or I'm going to look bad. Okay? So if your output is directly related to my success, whereas influential leadership, your success is a reflection of my effort. Okay? And so that's why I say I put this in a parenting perspective, because as a parent, as soon as you look at your first child the first time, I cannot explain how this happens, but you should you should feel this overwhelming sense of responsibility, right? Like, this baby is completely dependent on me. And not to put people down, I work with very, very high level professionals, so obviously I'm not babying them, but I look at them through the same lens. You're entrusting your career and your future and your family's, happiness on my ability to help you grow and be successful. Okay? I take that responsibility very seriously as a leader. So from my frame and in my opinion, to answer your question, a leader of influence is someone who takes responsibility for other people's success. Okay. I recognized a long time ago, like, I don't do work anymore. Okay. I don't move equipment. I don't weld things. I don't connect things. I don't do that work anymore. I don't even have calluses anymore except for lifting. Right. So I know that I don't move the needle. I don't do that. What do? I remove obstacles to make sure that my team can do that. So leading through influence is, who is this person? Yeah, there's a resume there. That's what got them hired. But they come to work every day for a reason. And they have their own dreams and aspirations for their own lives and for their own careers. What are those? Is this the right position for them? And then I just take very, very deep responsibility and accountability for their success. If they fail, the first question I ask is, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? How did I fail that person? That's a very different perspective than, did you get all the work done today that you were supposed to do today?
What about in moments of crisis? Let's just say that, oh my God, quarterly reviews or quarterly results just came in and we're doing pretty bad compared to last quarter. How would a leader that tries to lead by influence, you know, get through that moment of crisis compared to someone who tries to lead by fear?
Right, right. Well, leading by fear again goes straight to the scarcity of it, right?
Uh-huh.
Which is so bad quarterly numbers is one of two things. Either we didn't get all the work done that we said we were going to get done,
Mm-hmm.
or we got all the work done that we said that we were going to get done, but it cost us way more than we thought it was going to cost. So, firstly, hopefully you're not surprised by that. Hopefully you were able to recognize that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and it didn't
Mm-hmm.
surprise you at the end of the quarter. So you should kind of know that that's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as an abundance led and an influence led leader, it's, hey guys, clearly I know that you're competent. I know that you're the best construction managers, project managers, technicians, designers, whatever the case may be. I know because I hired you. I know what your resume says. You can absolutely do this work. So there has to be something wrong with the process or the tools. Which is it? And if you haven't asked that question weeks ago, right? Weeks ago, you should be asking those people even when you're having a good quarter. How's it going? Like, and that's what I mean by that. Not just like, how's it going? Oh, good. Because we're reflexive. We'll say, oh, good. What was a complete pain in your ass yesterday? What's the one? I mean, ask the tough questions, and that's what a leader's supposed to do. You're gonna listen. We're all trained well enough. You're gonna get the answer that you're looking for if you're not careful. So a good leader asks good questions, and I have a real hard spot with this. The quality of your questions reflects the quality of your life. It reflects the quality of your organization. It reflects the quality of your leadership. If you ask stupid, superficial questions, you're going to get stupid, superficial answers, and your organization is going to be stupid and superficial.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Absolutely. But if you ask, hey guys, so what did not work last week? Right? What did not work? What is holding you up? Hey man, I'll be honest with you. Like I did all my stuff and I sent it and I waited 3 days. It took that other organization 3 days to do this one little piece. Now I don't know their job perfectly, but I don't think it's that big of a deal that it should have taken 3 days. But what I was supposed to get done this week isn't going to get done till next week because of this. We need to look at that. As a leader, that's my job. It is not your job to go fight that fight and challenge other organizations, because the first thing you're going to get is ruffled feathers and pushback from technician to technician, from peer to peer, right? Don't tell me how to do my job. You stay in your lane. But as a leader, the whole point of being a leader is you have a higher point of view of the overall organization, and you can have a conversation that's saying, hey, are we not giving you what you need? One of the most powerful tools in Lean Six Sigma is called a SIPOC, and that's just an acronym for supplier gives you an input, you perform a process that creates an output that you deliver to your customer, SIPOC, okay? Every step of everything we do can be broken down to a SIPOC. So one of the first questions that I would ask that other organization, of course, being influentially led and being, optimistic and abundant is, hey, are we giving you everything you need? Have we created extra burden on you? Because from our perspective, we think we send this thing over to you, you do the check, and you send it back to us. It feels like it's a pretty simple process. And you talk to that organization and they go, no. Like you send us that thing, but then we have to go find all this other information to validate that. Oh my gosh, we have all that information. We could have sent it with it. But if you're not having those conversations, that's just one, I went way down a rabbit hole here, but it's just one example of what's wrong with the organization. Well, ask. And the question to ask is, hey guys, what pisses you off? I ask that question at every weekly meeting of my project teams. That's how I start. Well, I started with a safety minute, but then I ask, okay, what pissed you guys off this week?
Wait,
and I have gotten better feedback.
What's that about the safety minute?
Safety minute is just, what's the job? what's going on environmentally. It's situational awareness.
Okay.
We just have a habit in regulated industries to start every meeting with an awareness of safety. So it's habitual and it's part of the culture, which is we're going to talk about safety first. So every meeting starts with a safety minute.
Nice. I wanted
And
to ask you.
I actually expand that. So that seems pretty narrow. I actually expand it to safety, security, and quality because
Huh.
if you're not careful, you'll end up talking about ICE every single meeting, right? Or driver safety. That's not it. It really should be specific to who you are and what you do. But safety, security, and quality are typically the topics.
Let's just assume that there's a leader listening to this conversation, Charles, and they're mature enough to realize that, hey, you know what? I've been leading by fear at my workplace. What are some steps that someone can do to try to transition over into leading a little bit more, by influence and by having their employees respect them for who they are and not because they're, throwing threats and accusations 24/7?
Yep. And this is a huge differentiator because most leadership coaches would say, here's a tactic, here's a strategy, here's an outline, here's a framework, here's a script, right? Let's just paint over the real problem. The real problem is if you're leading from fear and you're leading from scarcity, it's because you don't believe in yourself. Sorry, but that's the truth. You feel like you're an imposter. You're worried that your team doesn't respect. You're really hyper focused on yourself, your image, because you don't understand your real value. Talk to a great leader, and what you'll find is someone who is very, very aware of their own identity and their own worth. Every single client that I work with, we start with a values exercise, an emotional needs exercise, and then we start talking about beliefs. And the reason we do that is when you lead from a place of authenticity and congruency, none of those other tactics are even come into the play. You can open up any one of my folders, any one of my notebooks. There's no such tactic about this is how you get attention when you walk into a room. This is how you keep power in a conversation. It's none of that. I don't teach any of that. I don't coach any of that. What I teach is who are you? What do you do better than anyone else in the world? And you personally know me well enough to know that my motto is everyone has value. And if you're leading from fear and scarcity and you're trying to control and you're trying to squeeze and you're trying to intimidate, it's because you don't understand your true value. So what I would tell any leader who's like, I look at myself in the mirror, I really don't like this, but I'm afraid to let go of that control. And if I do, the wheels are going to come off and the whole place is going to crash. I kind of don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but I understand that life has to go on. We have responsibilities, we have quota, we have to keep, all right. But you can absolutely start this work one decision at a time. Get to know, figure out your identity, your values, your worth, and start leading from that.
I think that makes perfect sense. Let me ask you one more thing just before we wrap it up. I've met a lot of leaders that are afraid of being perceived by their employees as being too soft. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it comes back to what we just talked about, which is control. People think that if they're perceived as too soft, they're going to be taken advantage of. They're going to lose their positional authority. Okay? And that, again, is all scarcity stuff. Why do people work for you? Why do they come to work every day? How and why are you able to get any work out of them at all? And if you think it's because, well, I'm the boss and I hold all the power because, I can tell them what to do and what not to do. Well, then of course you're going to be afraid of losing that power and that control every day. You are walking on eggshells every day, constantly trying to reassert that power.
Is there such a thing as being too soft, like in a bad way? Like, do leaders need to maintain a certain level of, I don't know how you would
Yeah,
describe it. Like,
yeah, detachment and objectivity.
yeah.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
yeah, those are perfectly healthy things. Yes, there is such a thing as being too soft when it's used as a tactic. Okay, so this idea of if I have to think about it, am I being too soft? Am I being too hard? That means that you're not leading from a place of authenticity. You're trying to play a role. You're trying to wear the mask of a hard ass, or you're trying to wear the mask of a really sweet, approachable person. That it's fake. It's fake. Not only does it not work, it stresses you out because it puts more cognitive load on you because you're constantly having to decide what's that line. And it's a line in the sand, and it's a different line in a different place for every employee, right? So you'll drive yourself absolutely crazy as opposed to these are my values. This is where I draw my line, and everybody complies with that because that line, which is a veiled word for boundary. Boundaries are established to protect our values. Boundaries aren't established to protect our status or protect our position. They're supposed to be to protect our values and only our values. So if you do this work from the inside out, your natural boundary, I have a very, very healthy boundary with what is too personal and what is not professional enough with my teams, with my clients. Right. I listen, I don't want to spend hours and hours and hours on Zoom calls and phone calls with clients stroking their egos. I'm not there to be your friend. I'm there to be the voice of reason and challenge you and push you. But at the same time, I'm not a drill instructor. I personally don't respond to that. But if I tried to chase every client and every team member to figure out where that line is, oh my God. That's how we typically live our lives, to be honest. That's how I lived my life before I did this work, was I had a different operating procedure for everybody in my life because it was outside in. It was what do they want? What are their boundaries? How do I respond to that? As opposed to defining my own position. But as a leader, it's more important than ever because what people trust and what they gravitate toward is consistency in leadership. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're a super, super softy and a super nice person or a super, super hard ass and super disciplined. It doesn't matter where that is. What matters is, can people count on you to be that every time they interact with you? They want the consistency so that they can trust you.
Speaking of consistency, and I promise my last question, have you noticed any habits that good leaders typically have on a day-to-day basis?
For me, that's very personal. That's a very personalized answer.
Okay.
I hesitate to say, one of the things that bugs me, right, are every day go on LinkedIn, go on any platform, and it's like these are the greatest habits of the greatest winners of the greatest blah. Oh my God, stop. You're doing exactly what I just described, which is chasing somebody else's definition that uses somebody else's boundaries,
Values.
that defines somebody else's leadership style. Ugh. What you ought to be doing is absolutely designing your leadership style, designing your day, designing your life around your values and your identity to make sure that it's as good a day as possible. And knowing what my non-negotiable values are defines how I interact with people, including my teams.
I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap it up. I mean, if there are any leaders listening to this conversation, you can go to therealcharlesbrown.com and you can even book a free VIP call with Charles.
Yeah, that's where it starts. It all starts with a
it, that's
conversation.
that's where it starts with the conversation. Man, as we speak more and we have more conversations, I become more aware of how important it is for someone to really narrow down what those non-negotiable values are.
Yeah.
Not just for in terms of leading, but more like to have a fulfilling life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've talked about this concept a little bit before, which is all these things that we do and all these roles, they're apps, right? We're downloading all these apps into our brain. But the operating system, that's the values. That's the emotional needs. That's what you need. So, downloading a scheduling app that your operating system can't read, it doesn't do you any good. You could download all the apps in the world. It's not going to change your operating system. The stuff that I'm talking about, the real problem, the real understanding, that demonstrated authority all comes from your operating system, not from the apps that you layer on top of it.
Perfect place for us to wrap it up, Charles. Appreciate your
Excellent.
time.
Yeah, thanks,
Catch you
Tony.
next week.
All right. See ya.